Sorry, Joe. All
You've
right.
asked the question again.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You've kept up yourself. I mean, I've kind of dealt with you in terms of like we're talking about mental health and the gym and all that. With the gym being closed, you guys finding now some time for yourself. We're gonna use some time to ground yourself through like just your general movement.
Yeah. Yeah. I always found the gym and specifically training with you to be my way to clear my mind. And I found that days that I didn't make the time to do that, I was actually less productive, either later in the evening when I needed to get something done, or I couldn't actually decompress and get to sleep. I would be anxious. And then it just has a knock-on effect. So by the end of the week, you're just like this. And I think that forcing ourselves, even though sometimes we feel like, oh, I just don't want to do it, especially even like right now where I'm coming into the office every day during the work week while Ryan is still working remotely or going into Midtown a couple of days. You get home, and even though your workout is going to be at home, it's so easy to just be like, oh, I just want to sit on the couch and just relax for the rest of the evening and pour myself a glass of wine and not worry about it. But I do that, I'm going to regret it the next day because I will feel the effect of it. And so, you know, the trickiest part, I think, for both of us is trying to keep our cardio up during this time, especially as the weather's going to start changing. I mean, we can do weights and bands and everything that we need to do in our apartment or in our building's gym once that reopens. But I think the cardio is the hardest part because I'm not, as you know, I'm not the one who can go out and run on pavement because I have bad knees. I need to use an elliptical machine in order to do something like that. Whereas Ryan can go out and run. So it's tricky trying to adapt, and during this time is hard.
Yeah,
but
you should
make it work.
Doing things like, I mean, we were literally like, in the heat of it was like running around the island in our kitchen. Like it was so limited in terms of what you could do. Or you know, we did a lot of jumping actually. Jumping seems to be a decent way to get your heart rate up and cardio up a little bit so that you had something happening, but not nearly as effective. And you know, my workout regimen was always, you know, I was like a 5 to 6 day a week person when we were going to the gym. And in that 5 to 6 day week, at least 2 of those days were cardio days for me in some fashion. So for a while it was treadmill running, and then my knees sort of started to not really like it a lot. So I moved over to the elliptical and that kind of stuff. But without that, the ready access to that, I've started to run outside again a little bit more and that kind of thing. You know, and even that has its own challenges. Breathing through a mask while you're like sucking down air as you run is not the easiest thing in the world. But you know, you make do with what you have, and it, you know, it gives you a good idea of what you're really capable of. You know, we also, at least Joe and I both have a wide breadth of workout experiences in our past to pull exercises from to try to keep things fresh and that kind of stuff, to try to find different ways to attack muscle groups, but also to find, you know, different ways to combine your workouts in some fashion or another so that you can keep things interesting. And that's part of the key too.
Right.
And honestly, having someone to work out with in that type of environment is helpful because, and you could picture this, me trying to hold the band while Ryan's resisting me is like dragging me across the floor versus like Ryan's like not even working any effort at all to keep me from moving. So,
yeah, we do.
But it is
one of those thick bands, a little resistance run, right? So you put it around your waist, and the other person holds that band, but I can drag Joe across the living room.
I just keep picturing something like that. Or do you guys just running laps around your island, and then your dog also kind of just going or watching you?
Yes, our dog is always a part of our workouts, much to our chagrin, because he likes to really get underneath you when you're in the middle of doing something and then stops you from doing what you're doing. So
that's fun. I know my dog. Well, at least your dog gets involved. My dog just looks at me and stares at me.
I prefer that.
That would be great.
The other thing I wanted to also, like, I think we're talking a lot about that, and then you guys have been pretty much, I mean, you've put on over, I don't know, God knows how many shows. I think you've mentioned earlier, Ryan, you put on like over 75 shows or something like that, if not more, and then way more than that probably. And then Joe, you've probably also been involved with God knows how many shows from beginning all the way to end. and you've seen just kind of the preparation that goes behind, like the behind the scenes preparing, building up to that show. Um, on your end, obviously it starts way before, and right now, which kind of you attest to right now, you guys looking at things that are projects that might be way in the future, but still over there. Um, Once it starts getting closer, now you start looking at how all these performers, and this might be, I mean, you probably know also, Ryan, from like just being involved in all this, but how do you see like the I guess the role that some of this preparing for a show or preparing for a role or building up to auditions, all that kind of thing, preparing your body for all that stuff plays in this industry, from your experience?
Well, if we're talking about it in light of, say, COVID-19, for example, a lot of the unions that represent performers or that represent performer adjacent people like SDC, which represents directors and choreographers, a lot of their reopening guidelines are making mention of the need to rebuild the stamina of performers before you're expecting them to do, 8 shows a week and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
These are recommendations, of course, but this is going to be the case for any show that has to reopen. So I was talking about it this morning about the Mean Girls tour, which is a show that I work on, and one of the concerns is, okay, so we pick a reopening date and we're going to look at this date. Well, how we need to be loaded in and ready to go in that city in advance because the cast is going to need time on stage to reacclimate to everything. It's been so long. And so figuring out those reopening plans for each show that was running is something that is continued for production managers. We've been talking with general management offices that we work with to try to make plans for that kind of thing. So in relation to COVID, that is something that is being discussed right now pretty extensively. In non-COVID times, we as the production's physical side, the technical elements of the show, we prep for performers from the time that we start talking about shows. So like, if I'm talking about a dance show, the first thing that I'm asking is it a sprung floor? How do I build this thing in a way that it's going to be safe and repeatable for dancers to be on it for 8 shows a week, 52 weeks a year? And that's something that's a concern, right?
Yeah.
We're always on the lookout for the safety elements that make sure that the show is repeatable for everybody. So sprung dance floors, if they're on multiple levels and things like that, how do they safely do the things that they're supposed to do at those levels? And safety is the name of the game for my job in the context of a lot of that stuff. Joe, I don't know if you have more.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's going to be really difficult for performers to come back when the time comes. I mean, our company is currently just finished a workshop for one of our resorts down in Mexico, and we had basically a 2-week workshop, 2.5-week workshop. And the performers that have, been working for us as a company for years, developing shows, they're kind of like our go-to workshop people, because that's a specific skill set to be in that environment where things are constantly changing and having to adapt and rememorize things immediately. We noticed within 2 days of being in rehearsal that it actually wasn't necessarily just the physical stamina that the performers weren't there. And these were all performers who are in good physical shape and had maintained that over the course. They mentally were out of shape. They could not remember lines. They honestly couldn't even read music as efficiently. They had to keep stopping and asking, what does this symbol mean in the music, which is stuff that they should just know. They, had a hard time picking up the choreography and then repeating it or changing it. It was a real struggle. And all of them said, they were like, oh my God, I'm just like mentally out of shape, because when you're doing it day in and day out, it stays in your body. But when you stop it for 6 months, a year, or whatever it's going to be, it's going to take time for the performers, for the musicians, if they haven't been staying up on practicing, keeping their chops up, so to speak. It's going to be a bit of a struggle at first for people to get back into it. I mean, will they? Absolutely, but I think people need to start planning for that eventuality, and it's not going to just come roaring back.
That's huge. I mean, something that I could not, and it's huge to hear that you're seeing this, and just from the aspect of like the fact that there are also things being rolled out that are keeping in mind, like, you guys cannot just come back and just try it out. And I think it's kind of floating out there, but no one wants to really face it in a way of like,
I mean, I think of it all the time. Like, you know, like, I mean, how many performers will come back and still fit into their costumes in the same way because they will not have been doing 8 shows a week for, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months, a year, you know, longer, who knows in terms of what that timeline is. You know, I was working on a kids show before everything hit that was going to be, I mean, it was a predominantly cast with children. All those kids are going to age out already. You know, like, we're going to have to recast a large portion of that show just because, you know, those kids will age out. And those are unfortunate things that happen as a result of this. But those are also, you know, from our end of things, those are expenses and costs that we're working to figure out how we handle all of that too, from a business side of things.
yeah, and
Yeah, I mean, to demonstrate it, like on a national tour, a good rule of thumb is that if you had a layoff where you were, you know, not, you know, performing for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, sometimes you would have 4-week layoffs. And I always advocated with my team that if we had a 3-week, I would kind of let it slide by where we wouldn't do a full run of the show the day or the afternoon of the first performance back. But if we were at the 4-week mark, I was like, no, we have to do a full run of the show, technically everything as, you know, show condition, because without doubt, the cast would literally just be standing there on stage and be like, I have no idea what comes next. I don't even know what my next line is, you know, and it's just because it's not in your body for 4 weeks. And so imagine what it's going to be like a full year. They're going to be back in rehearsal as if the show's opening for the first time.
yeah, it's huge. And it's not to mention the fact that, like, everything you guys talk about is it's so specific and so it's so high craft. Just talking from the side that, like, the thing that resonated a lot with me right now is just you, Brian, talking about like the level of craftsmanship. Not, and we're talking about craftsmanship behind the scenes of looking at just something as simple as the floor. You're looking at safety, right? Your world is safety, and in general also, like, even your world, Joe, is also like, we're looking at safety. We want these performers to perform. We want these performers to be at peak. We want them to, like, be able to put on the shows, and not only put on the shows, but put on the best show, because ultimately these are your artists, these are your people, and then this is also your show, and you want to bring out the best of the show, which comes from the best of the artists, and that comes from also giving out the people, like, what they want to, the success of the show and success for everybody, right? So I think putting that into context, the huge thing that I think it's kind of pushing right now is, at least for me, as I look into this, and I've talked to you, Joe and Ryan, before this world, it's been this, like, process of, like, almost a year now, when I remember having this conversation with you a while back, about how can the industry start to put in fundamentals or foundations within, like, the education of a performer, or like the support system for a performer, for mental and physical, both aspects, right? Because I think how you come up as a performer, and you guys might attest to this too, is like, that becomes, to me, I think, becomes like a second thought. It's like, oh, I'm going to be fit because I'm going to be doing 8 shows a week, so therefore I'll get fit. Versus,
there's different types of being fit. I mean, you've taught me that, because I remember one of the first things that we ever talked about when we initially started training is, you said, do you want a beach body, or do you want a body that's actually strong and powerful? And I was like, I want a body that's strong and powerful. I don't really care if I have the 6-pack. And, you know, you set up a program where I was able to really strengthen my entire core and my legs and everything that I wanted. But if you had probably looked at me with my shirt off, you would have been like, oh, he works out. Not that I didn't work out, but it wasn't the ideal, you know, perfect, you know, chiseled body. And I think a lot of performers, they want that because they think that's what they need. But in reality, yes, you need that for a lot of the work out there, but you also need to have a body that is extremely flexible but strong.
It's huge. Yeah, just hearing it, I just love hearing you guys just talk about a little bit of that. I think what I'm also noticing is, like, if you were able to ignore it before, I think there's no way you can ignore it. I think that's something that's going to be one of the biggest things that it's going to just kind of, hopefully not, but one of the biggest things to, like, barrier to get through up until, like, when things return, is that I think COVID is going to expose a lot of nuances in performance like that. It's like you can have that body and all that, but the amount of preparation that it takes, like internally, for you to actually be able to perform this 8 shows a week, it's like restarting from scratch in a way. So it's gonna be, if you didn't do anything, I think you guys kind of alluded to it, and you kind of did too, Joe, with like your workshop. It's like you notice that we're just out, like mentally. That's just for me to hear that. I'm just like, Jesus. And that's just a small workshop.
I mean, I think regardless of who you are and what your role happens to be, and this just extends to life. This is not necessarily a performer moment versus, you know, a manager moment versus something else. It comes down to your ability to self-discipline to a certain point too. It comes down to your ability to thrive, to set up for yourself a parameter in which you can succeed and then thrive in the context of things. For me, that has to do with regularity, right? So like, Joe will tell you that I'm a huge creature of habit in terms of how things shake out. So like when I'm watching what I'm eating, it's like I eat the same thing almost every single day, save for like my dinner. You know, it's my routine through the day becomes the same thing because that's a regimen in which I can thrive in some way. And I think that in the moment of COVID, in the world of like a pile of unsurety in terms of everything that we do, the only thing that you can do is set up those kind of structures for yourself so that you give yourself an ability to thrive. And so I know a lot of people who have maintained, you know, like, well, I used to get up at 8 a.m. and for the first few months, I just slept as much as I sort of wanted to. And there's a good coping with that to a point. But after that point, I know a lot of people have wanted to get themselves back on track again by, no matter what happens, I'm still getting up at 8 o'clock every morning. No matter what happens, I'm still going to do the following steps every single day because those allow me the opportunity to thrive, you know. And I think setting up those structures is totally valuable, especially in these moments.
Yeah, no, especially when it's huge. Also from like just you're right, like a perspective of getting through your day. It's just, yeah, you need a structure to wake you up to like, all right, this is my day. Otherwise, it's so unpredictable that right now everything feels like, what is 5 p.m. already? What happened? How did I get to that?
Yeah, if you don't give yourself that structure, I feel like I personally can't feel positive about my existence if I don't feel like I have some control over something, you know, especially at the height of us being on lockdown, because there was nothing that we could do about it. That little element of control that we could bring to our lives, I thought was probably one of the most valuable things that we could do for ourselves.
So on that light, I guess when we're looking at, and this is where I kind of want to bring it back to like you were talking about future things that happen and all that. For the next coming, but like we're at a point right now where we're 3 months away from 2020 ending. Thank God. But but
I don't know that the front half of 2021 is any better. I don't really know that the front half of 2021 is any better.
January 1st is going to be that much different than December 31st. But we're looking at 2021, and we're looking at 3 months away from this year ending, and then New Year starting. And there's like I have family members right now in Mexico that for them they've opened up some live indoor theaters. They've started a few things over there. They obviously are super ecstatic, and they're keeping a capacity of like only certain amount of people. They're starting to film again. They're starting a few things over there. Cases are not that different from here, but also cases are handled differently. We handle the things here differently a lot, which is why New York has been able to keep everything nice and calm. But what would be something you would say to I guess to both performers and people that are behind the scenes like you guys, as in like tips to make the best of the next 3 to 5 months? Like how do like, yeah, what were you saying for preparing for a possible, if any, return? Is there a return next year?
You know, like I don't think we can count on a timeline for return right now. I don't think that anybody can say, okay, I'm ready. March is my time, and I'm going to line my life up like that, because I think you're going to set yourself up for disappointment and failure as a result of that. Not failure, but like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think that you need to be able to move from moment to moment in life with an element of adjustability for yourself. And I just talked about structure and how important that is. But I think that you can't commit yourself to a timeline at this point. And I think that, from a mental preparedness kind of a place, things that stress people out like money and stuff like that, it's important to have work right now. So whatever you can do to be out there working and providing yourself with not only income, but maybe even something that's more fulfilling for you personally than anything else. So maybe you're out there volunteering as a poll worker for the election, or you're out there with any number of like the get out the vote organizations that exist. Whatever you have to do to give yourself some work, some structure, and some goals and some aims in the temporary period is the thing that you should be doing. Because once we establish what timelines are for things coming back, if you're somebody already in a show, then you'll have an appropriate period of time to know what your return timeline is. But if you're not somebody who's in a show right now and you're somebody who would rely on auditioning and stuff, see what other avenues exist for you that are out there that can provide you with some fulfillment and most importantly, the ability to pay your rent from moment to moment, because that's the stress of these moments. If you're a performer, take the time, the spare time that you have around that to continue to hone your craft and do the things that you need to on a personal level. But I don't think that there's good advice about what the timeline means. I don't think that advice exists from anybody right now. So I think it has to do with turning your focus inwards and trying to, be good to yourself, give yourself the arm's length, because this is not something that's ever happened before. And you can't be expected to just, rebound in 4.5 seconds when you're talking about the world in which we live at this point. We're in totally uncharted territory.
And I would say that from a performer or a technician or a management position, or perspective, there are other forms of entertainment that I think will return before Broadway or national touring does. So I would encourage those people who have not gone off and done other survival type jobs and are okay staying in that area, and they're still kind of, looking to stay within the industry in some way, that you look at other opportunities that might come up in the next couple of months, like cruise ship or corporate entertainment, event work, theme parks, resorts. I think that those should be viable options for people, because I know even personally that there are projects that we have that will roll out in the coming months that are going to precede any type of Broadway work that's going to come out for the next year. So I think people should be flexible, and they should be willing to, if they truly want to work in entertainment, they should be open-minded as to the types of entertainment that they can work in. So that's my biggest piece of advice right now.
That's huge. My dog was
I always I always go back to a phrase that there was a teacher that I worked with in high school a lot, and he always spoke about really focusing on things that are life-giving as opposed to taking away from you in some way. And that can be mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever that means. I think focusing on those things that are life-giving right now are great things. So if you have passion projects, if people ask you to participate in things that are, related to Zooms and stuff like that, some of the digital stuff that's been out there, those things are being watched and people are looking at those things. They're things that you can go back to and say, I did this during this period of time. It may not have been the most money-taking thing, but it is something that gave me some life, that was exciting, that I'm very proud of in some way. And I think that's valuable.
That's huge. I mean, yeah, I think just hearing that too is from you guys also. It's kind of huge knowing that there is an understanding. It's like, we understand that reality is that if you live in a place like New York City, especially coming from somewhere living in New York City, is that you have to pay rent and you have to do these things. So it's okay to follow something else that's gonna fill you. Follow something else that's gonna temporarily fulfill what you have to do, and then go from there. But
yep.
Yeah, no, it's so there is the theme park. Oh my God, theme parks! You mentioned the theme park show, and it was like when I was in Florida, it's just when like Disney opened. God, it was like it was just mad. I was like, oh my God, what? For a second, I really thought, I was like, this is my time to go into Star Wars. But then I decided not to. I was also kind of terrified at the same time. It's like, I don't know if I want to do that. But that's huge, that like cruises, theme parks, and those are things that I don't think people really consider, right? even within that, you still have to kind of think about, go back to if you do want to do theme parks or you do want to do film or commercial or the project that you kind of mentioned a little more, you have to go back to like, where are you mentally and where are you physically, and then setting that structure, kind of like Ryan said. You have to set up that structure for
Be open.
adaptability. Yep.
Yeah.
Guys, Jesus,
Totally
I don't
be
know
open.
how to thank you so much for some of the things you guys said. It was just great, and then and you answered a lot of the questions that I got were kind of related to that. So I just took those questions and framed them a little bit just to kind of make the conversation a little friendlier.
Good, interesting. No.
But I really hope that I can get to see you guys again face to face now that I'm back over here.
That would be nice.
I know, it'd be nice. So we'll kind of keep in touch. I'll check in with you guys for that. Maybe over this weekend or something, we can try something out.
That'd be great.
Are in town.
We're around. So.
Thank you so much, guys. Really, for real. Just seeing you guys is always fun, and it's always a
Our
great
pleasure
time for me.
And thanks for doing this for people. I know that they appreciate it. So
I hope so. But I will see you, Joe, Ryan. You guys, I don't want to take more of your time because you guys are busy bees. And I will see you. I will check in with you guys later.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Jonathan.
You guys, awesome. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye, guys.